your inferior and your superior vena cava drain the unoxygenated blood from the body. So the carotid artery drains the upper part of the body into the superior, and we know that the blood comes from the lower part of the body through muscle contraction and relaxation, and that's what moves that blood up the veins, because we're moving uphill, up into the inferior vena cava. Blood enters the right atrium. All right, so that's where the blood comes in. Did you talk about,
We didn't talk about
You just read.
voting after all?
No, nothing.
You don't need to know that. I think that's beyond this class. All right, so that's the blood coming into the right atria. Once it gets into the atria, it is dumped through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. All right? At the same time that's happening, you have oxygenated blood coming into the left side of the heart. All right? So the oxygenated blood is coming from the lungs, through the pulmonary veins, into the left atria, going through the bicuspid valve or mitral valve into the left ventricle. So when those two ventricles are full, those valves snap shut. That's the first heart sound you hear, is the closing of the tricuspid and bicuspid. That is your S1 heart sound. That's your all right? The right ventricle and the left ventricle push, all right? They need a lot of push because they need a lot of resistance, if you think about it, pushing uphill, all right? So they have a very big stretch and they push the blood, left ventricle out of the aorta, back into the body. So they're sending oxygenated blood back into the body. The right ventricle is pushing the blood up through the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery goes to the lungs where the blood gets oxygenated. So that's how blood flows. Comes in from the right and the left simultaneously. All right, but if you think about it differently, right side of the heart, blood comes in through your vena cavas, right atria, tricuspid, right ventricle, out through the pulmonary artery, into the lungs, where it gets oxygenated, pulmonary veins, left atria, left ventricle, out the aorta, back to the body. Now you have oxygenated blood. Okay? You have a different color marker? I did.
She's supposed to the picture on our bottom.
Yeah. You know?
You can
I don't know why they put on her phone.
You should be the teacher in bottom.
The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. All right, it is responsible for controlling heart rate. All right, normal heart rate is 62.100.
Oh, no. Wait.
Okay,
Those are my patients.
the SA node sends messages to the right and left atria, telling the right and left atria when to contract. all right? So as they fill and they start to dump blood into the ventricles, there's a little bit of blood that just can't seem to get out of the atria. So the SA node tells the atria to contract, and that's called your atrial kick. So it's that last little push of that last 25 mLs of blood that just happens to be hanging, that just can't get out. All right, so atrial kick. It also sends an impulse to the AV node. All right, the AV node sits for a few minutes while the atrial kick is occurring. Then the AV node sends the message to the bundle of his, to the right and left bundle branches. And attached to those bundle branches are little fibers called Purkinje fibers. And those little Purkinje fibers are what tell the ventricles to contract. Okay? So you've got your SA node, which is the pacemaker of the heart. And if you think about it, a lot of our cardiac dysrhythmias come from our atria, because the atria start to beat very, very fast. And the SA node is no longer in control. So when you start to look at dysrhythmias, it's that conduction system that doesn't control the heart anymore. All right, so you have your atrial kick, and then you have your contraction of your right ventricle. When the blood leaves the aorta and the pulmonary artery, and those valves snap shut, all right, your pulmonic valve and your aortic valve, they snap shut. That's your second heart sound. That's your S2. All right, so S1 is your lub and S2 is your dub. Closing of mitral and tricuspid, closing of aortic and pulmonic.
Can you say that last part again? Closing, S1 is closing of the...
When you listen to the heart, it goes boom, 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 boom. So you hear two sounds, all right? So when the mitral and the tricuspid valve snap shut, that's the first sound, the lub. Then the next two valves, the aortic and the pulmonic, snap shut, and you hear the dub. So the dub, the dub, the dub. So those two closings, the two different closings of the valves is what gives you your heart sound. So that's what you hear when you're taking a heart rate. And the pulmonic. Did they teach you semilunar versus atrioventricular? All right, your tricuspid and your bicuspid valves are called atrioventricular valves because they're between the atria and the ventricle. Your aortic and pulmonic valves are called semilunar valves. So when you think of them together, it's semilunar. When you think of your two upper valves together, they're atrioventricular. What else did you need to know?
I have a question. You said you might have some.
Yes, I can do.
Of the heart fails. So if my left ventricle isn't doing its job, it's not pumping the blood out of that ventricle out through my aorta to the body. So because it's not pumping as the blood's coming in, got nowhere to go because I can't push it out because the pump just doesn't want to pump. So the blood starts to fill up in the left ventricle. which causes pressure in the left ventricle. Eventually, can't hold any more blood, so it's gonna push it into the left atria. The left atria is gonna get larger or hypertrophy, and it's gonna be under so much pressure because we've got blood pushing back and blood coming in. And eventually, the left atria just says, like when you let go of a balloon, and shoves all that blood into the lungs. Hence, you have pulmonary edema and left-sided heart failure. So left-sided heart failure is all about the left ventricle not being able to pump. And the worse that left ventricle becomes, the worse the heart failure becomes, to the point where the person actually drowns in their own secretions. So, and you didn't learn ejection fraction in that. So you got the left ventricle, it doesn't pump properly, so the blood backs up. As long as you know how it flows forward, if this isn't pumping, everything is gonna start to flow back. And then you're gonna have fluid in your lungs. And that's your left-sided heart failure. So with left-sided heart failure, you're gonna see lung problems, you're gonna see dyspnea, you're gonna hear crackles, you're gonna hear wheezes, you're gonna have pulmonary edema, so you're gonna have pink frothy secretions, coughing, cyanosis, okay? Because all that fluid is sitting in the alveoli, so gas exchange isn't gonna take place either. Now, what happens next is the lungs are full, but we still have blood coming in from the right side of the heart to be oxygenated. And it's going through the pulmonary artery. And when it gets to the lungs are gonna say, no way. We don't want any, go away, go back to where you came from. Okay? So, the blood starts to flow backwards. So it's going through the pulmonary artery, back into the right ventricle. The right ventricle starts to hypertrophy, eventually back through the right atria and out your inferior and superior vena cava, back into the body. So now you have right-sided heart failure. Right-sided heart failure, we're going to see ascites, we're going to see peripheral edema, we're going to see jugular vein distension, you're going to see enlargement of the spleen and the liver. All right, so those are the things you see in right-sided. So left-sided is predominantly lung issues, coughing, rails, crackles, wheezing, dyspnea. Right-sided heart failure is body. So now we're gonna start to see excess fluid build up in the body. And that's why you start to see ascites, you're gonna start to see swelling in the thighs and the calves, all right? Because all that blood is gotta go somewhere. Left-sided heart failure causes right-sided heart failure. You can't have well, I shouldn't say you can't. The only time you have right-sided heart failure without left-sided heart failure is with COPD. Because in COPD, your lungs are sick. And if my lungs are sick, they don't want the blood coming from the pulmonary artery. So in COPD, my lungs are really stiff, they're sick, I don't have room, I can barely breathe, I already have air trapped. So it shoves all the blood back to the right side of the heart. So in COPD, heart failure on the right side is called core pulmonary. So that's how you identify it from right-sided heart failure caused by left-sided heart failure. Got it?
Yes. Much better.
Thank you
Okay.
so
Now,
much.
what were you asking?